Welcome everybody to my podcast, Big Little Small Talk. I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan and I love to talk, but I also love to listen. If you're new here, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome listeners to Big Little Small Talk. You're on 4DDB 102.7 FM Community Radio and I'm Megan O'Hara-Sullivan. In our Big Little Small Talk segment today, we've got a special guest. Her name is Lyndall Hill, and you've probably heard of her. She's got lots of irons in the fire, one of them being Word Fest Toowoomba. That's her pet project, I would say. But she's got lots of things to tell us about, lots of really interesting things. But I'd just like to start by welcoming you along, Lyndall, to Big Little Small Talk.
Thank you very much, Megan. It's lovely to be here.
Lyndall, you've just come back from an extensive overseas trip. Can you tell me where you've been, why you went? I'll start with that.
Yeah, sure. It was 2 years in the making. I've always been a book buff and love reading anything to do with words. And so I have been putting aside a bucket list of places and festivals and bookshops and all sorts of different things related to books that I wanted to go and explore. And because my husband is no longer interested in long-distance flights, I ended up being a solo traveller and went over to, first of all, the UK, went to Hay-on-Wye, which was where the first international book town was established, and then up to Scotland and Wigtown for its book festival and its arts and crafts festival, which was wonderful. Travelled down to Lancaster for a Lit Fest, where I learnt lots and lots of things from the curators of the festival. They were wonderful. Then went to London. The book barge on the River Thames is absolutely fascinating. You walk into the little boat and sit down and snuggle up with a book, and it's just got a beautiful feel to it. Then I went across to Paris for a week, hoping to stay at Shakespeare and Company, which is around the world known for it's the only English book shop in Paris, in France, I think. And I was going to stay there for a week and help them out and whatever, but they were doing some renovations. So I ended up going on a daily basis just to have a wander through and find little gems, hidden gems of books, and I managed to bring 2 back. Then went across to Dublin, which is where my ancestors, my heritage comes from, so I always feel very comfortable going back to Ireland. And had a wonderful time in Dublin and found some fantastic books and bookshops and lots of other things as well. But because I have a great interest in history, family history in particular. And then finally went across to Vancouver, where a couple of my cousins over there took me to Vancouver Island and to Sydney Town, which is their international book town in Canada. And we had a wonderful time hunting up all the treasures that they had on there. And then I came home.
Were you buying books along the way?
I took a backpack of 10 kilos because I was travelling solo and didn't want to cart a great big suitcase with me everywhere, and also some of the horror stories about being, luggage being lost and so on since the pandemic. So I travelled with enough clothes for about 6.5 weeks, but by the time I got to Vancouver, those clothes were down to 2 outfits and 1 pair of shoes, and the rest was books.
So had you ditched some of the clothes?
All the way along.
Oh, how funny. To sacrifice for books.
For books. But that is my mode of travelling, because I think, if you've had things in your wardrobe that you maybe haven't used for a little while, or you've been in your wardrobe for a couple of years, you think, I could probably take those with me and then, ditch them along the way. So,
do you know, I have never packed to go away thinking I might lose some of these clothes on the way and then make room for something else. But I think it's very smart. Just before we go on I want to talk about where your love of books came from. Tell me about being, I don't think it's insulting to say, a middle-aged lady who's been married for a long time, travelling on your own. What was that like?
It was a bit scary, a bit challenging, but a bit exciting. It was challenging because I am directionally ineffective in many cases, but I had to learn how to find where north was all the time and work out how to read the GPS properly, and that was great. It was challenging because the rail strikes were on in the UK. It was part of the funeral for the Queen Elizabeth II, and all of the things were closed that I had booked for, like Westminster Abbey and Poets' Corner, and so things got a little bit cancelled. So it was challenging along the way, and the British rail strikes, everywhere I went, I was just either in or before or after, so it was always juggling things. And usually Murray's there to help me with those sorts of things, but I had to survive on my own. I'm also a celiac, so finding the food for myself was a little bit of a difficulty in some places, particularly in Paris, where you'd walk past all these beautiful patisserie shops and the smell of all these wonderful things, knowing that you couldn't go inside. So so the food was a little bit challenging as well. But I'm back and I'm here and I'm all in one piece. And
I suppose I don't want to labour this point too much, but I'm curious about I know a lot of couples have time apart and do things separately, but as someone who's been married for 30 years, if I have to go and do something on my own, I do find it quite challenging in terms of who I am as a single person, or am I looking like I'm out sort of trying to pick up people because you can't go to a bar as a woman on your own?
No. I guess I kept my activities virtually to the daytimes. I did feel that it wasn't appropriate for me to be out doing pubs and things at night. And I did spend a lot of time in youth hostels. So there were a lot of activities that were already provided in a lot of those places. The one particularly in Dublin had its own band entertaining the people. It had a bar, restaurant, which I could use some things off the menu. So I didn't even need to go anywhere. And I met such a wonderful range of younger people.
Was it mostly all younger people?
The majority, yes. But there were some people my age, and there were couples and there were families, which I was quite surprised about. And I would recommend going to YHA hostels, and I'd recommend for families who are looking for a less expensive way of travel that really fits the bill. It's great.
Tell me about being in a bunk that might be 3 stories up.
Horrendous. It was after I had just arrived, after the really, really long flights that you have coming from Australia to anywhere in the world, really. And I was tired. The taxi driver couldn't pinpoint the exact hostel on his GPS and left me in a dark street leading up to a laneway where the hostel was, but I was disoriented, jet lagged, and finding the hostel was difficult. And then to be told at the reception desk that I was bed number 9 in a 3 bunk, and then having to climb my way up, I was exhausted. And to get up the ladder, and the ladder wasn't particularly strong, and I did find it very difficult, but by the 3rd night I was okay.
So were there people sleeping in the 2 bunks that you had to climb over?
Yes, they have little curtains that curtain everybody off, and that inside the cubicle you have a little light of your own and a point for charging your phones and so on. So it's quite comfortable once you get there, but hoisting myself up, that was a challenge. But it was the only place that I had 3 levels. Most of the others were either 2 levels or I was on the bottom bunk. So that wasn't so bad.
I have to say, I just admire you. I think, I might have lain there that first night and almost cried myself to sleep thinking, what have I done? I'm not having fun.
No, I wasn't having fun that night, but I did sleep like a log. And so when I woke up the next morning, it was sunny. And I think the weather has a great deal of influence on your mood and how you feel about what you're going to do for the day. And I was fairly well organised before I left Australia in terms of what I wanted to see and when and how to fit it in and so on. I'd also done some dog and cat sitting here back in Toowoomba and in southeast Queensland for the last 2 years to get myself on an international site, and managed to get 2 really great cat sits, which gave me a little bit more space for a couple of weeks and gave me an opportunity to live like a local, and that was really good fun. I really enjoyed that.
talk to me about the difference between cat people and dog people in your experience with that minding overseas.
Okay, so the cat people treat them like babies. They're part of the family, but not just, a peripheral part of the family. They are cosseted. They're made out as if they really are a human. And so the first cat sit with two people who'd never had children, middle-aged couple who'd never had children and who weren't game to go further than 4 hours away on their holiday in case something happened. And they had left 9 pages of instructions about the feeding, and it took me almost a whole day just to find my feet and get into the routine. But and I wasn't going to let the cats out at all in case something happened. But it was great. It was a little village called Dulwich, which is only 3 train stops out of central London, and it was 12 minutes by train into the centre. So there were opportunities for me to be away. I couldn't. One of the cats had to be fed every 3 or 4 hours, and so it meant I could only do little trips. But I fitted it all in. It's amazing what you can do when you have to.
And were these people getting in touch with you saying, have they eaten,
Yes.
have they done a poo like we used to do with
yes.
our kids and our parents when they were looking after them?
Yes, and I had to send a photo every day to make sure that everything was okay. But that's all right. That's part of the deal, and when you sign up, you know that that's it. The other was also a cat sit. I didn't have any dogs this time, but it was cats and fish at the next one. And she was just completely the reverse, very relaxed, had gone with a friend to New York for a long weekend. And she just was open about everything, and the cats had a flap and went in and out as they pleased, which was very, very good because I didn't have to worry about the tray, changing the litter tray. So that was great. And that was only 15 minutes north of Brighton, so I got to see the coastline and went to Brighton, and that was fabulous.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So, Lyndall, tell me about your history. Did you grow up here in Toowoomba?
My grandparents and my mum did, but my dad was a school teacher, and I was born in Warwick, and then he was transferred into Toowoomba as the first deputy principal appointed to Harristown High School. Then he was appointed as the principal to Dalby. So we did tend to move, but within the Downs. And then after that, it was southeast Queensland and mostly in the Redlands area. So I used to come back for holidays, and my grandmother, who lived in James Street, where the car park of Dan Murphy's is now.
Oh, sad. Grandma's house, yeah.
But my grandfather would have thought that was quite...
Oh, right. In that Irish tradition.
Absolutely. And so I used to come for school holidays. She taught me on one of the old treadle sewing machines how to sew, and had wonderful memories, met lovely friends up here in those times that I've kept in touch with over those years. So I consider Toowoomba to be a very familiar place for us. I was transferred in after I became a teacher, in the same vein as both my mum and dad, and came to Toowoomba in 2001 as principal at Darling Heights State School. We had, and then I was transferred across to Wilsonton State School, and had 8 years here before we bought a little bit of a tree change at Stanthorpe. Murray retired from his job as a visual arts head of department at Rosewood High, and we set up a little blueberry hobby farm out there on 58 acres, and had a few years out there while I was principal at Warwick West. So I've had a few sort of educational background spots in this area.
Yeah. Do you know, Lyndall, once I heard this statistic that the children of 2 teachers are the smartest kids around. So you're the child of 2 teachers, and then your children are the children of two teachers, so I'm not sure whether they're having compounding smartness, but they should be sort of, whatever the I won't say rocket scientists, because that's not. So I don't know about that.
I don't know about that statistic. I think you pulled that out of the air.
No, I did hear that once. No, so tell me about your love of literature and your love of words. Tell me, where do you think that stems from?
I think it stems from my father's father, who told Irish tales till the cows came home. We lived next door to him at Birkdale in the Redlands, and my fondest memories are lying under the mango tree in the summer school holidays, just reading every day, did my chores, whatever I had to do, and then the day was mine. And I went through lots and lots of books and read, voraciously. I ate up as much as I could possibly get. And in those days it was a matter of having to go to the public library because there wasn't a lot of bookshops and news agencies that were selling books and things. So my first job was in a news agency and stacking the shelves of the books. So it's always been something that's been book related ever since I can remember. And my parents read to us. They encouraged us to read. I'm the oldest of 4 siblings, so I was encouraged to read to the younger ones as well. And I think that life just opened up for me. Every time I opened a book, there was a new world, and I could immerse myself in all sorts of dreams and fantasies and pretending that I was those characters. And then, of course, going to uni and doing English literature. I became a high school English teacher, so that's where it followed on from there, I suppose.
Just as you were talking about the stacking the books in the newsagents, I just had this sense of smell that you get when you open a new book.
Isn't it wonderful? Yes, and also the smell of old books that have been musty, and they're, the pages and the crinkle of the pages. There's so much, visceral stuff in there that is related to books, and I guess that's where the love of books has come from.
I'll just remind the listeners that they're on 4DDB and you're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, in Big Little Small Talk, and we're talking to Lyndall Hill, who is the founder of Word Fest here in Toowoomba, which we will talk about in a minute, but we're talking about how Lyndall's love of literature, where it stemmed from, and I guess where it's taken you as we sit at a table filled with things like old colonials, Dad and Dave, Ship of Death. There's just surrounded here by books. So what was your sort of favourite genre then when you were a child reading these books? Who did you fancy yourself as?
Agatha Christie's. I actually ended up with the total collection, the full collection of all her books. Plus, she wrote under the pseudonym or the pen name of Mary Westmacott and did a whole lot of romance novels as well. So I also got those. I was fascinated by the story and I really went into it in great depth. So that and Georgette Heyer, which was the historical romance novel. So after I went through the regular kinds of things that you do in study at school, and at uni was more classical literature, and I guess the Agatha Christie's would be my favourite. I actually gave that whole set to my oldest granddaughter as a present, passing it on to the next generation. So I don't think she likes them, but that doesn't matter.
Well, I was talking to a lady yesterday whose mother collected a lot of brooches, and she said her children didn't want the brooches, but I think people change over time, don't they? So your granddaughter will appreciate that as a gift from you, I'm sure.
Oh, well, if she doesn't, she'll find somebody who she can give it to that might appreciate it. So that's the one thing I've learnt, that I used to be really anxious about people who didn't return my beautiful books, and now I don't, because I think, right, well, if they read them and enjoyed them and said, oh, here's a book to someone else, then it's spreading the word. If they put it on their bookshelf and it looks lovely and pretty and they're happy with that, that's good too. So I've learnt to let go. And now I don't hoard as much as I used to, which is a good thing.
So you tend to give your books away?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you moved houses and packed up a lot of your books and thought, have you ever read a book twice?
I have. I have very few books that I will read twice, but I know that the age that you read them really influences how much you get out of it. So things that I read, the classics that I read, like Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice and books like that, when I was young and probably very naive, now I can look at the actual craft of the writing more so than just the story that went with it and the characters, which is what I used to love. But now I can appreciate the skill of the authors. And I have read things, I can't give you a list off the top of my head, but a lot of books that I have reread, I've thrown in the pile and said, oh, why did I think that was wonderful? But you do become a bit of a reviewer and a critic in your own mind and say, yeah, I won't pass that on. I won't recommend that to anybody either. So you become a little bit more, I don't know.
Discerning?
Yes, I guess so. Yeah, yeah.
Whereas once I suppose you might have identified with the youth in the book, now you're identifying with the mother or even the grandmother and thinking, oh, that's very harsh of that young person to be harsh about, or whatever. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
and you can see things from different perspectives. The different characters have a different meaning for you as you get older.
Have you ever thought about writing yourself?
I have written. This is the first book that I wrote, which was a school textbook called Speak for Yourself, which is the oral. It's for older secondary students on how to become oral communicators. So that, and then when we lived in Townsville, Murray and I shared a TAFE course on herbs in the heat. So people were asking about, and instead of explaining it all the time, so I wrote I compiled a book. I didn't write the actual information, but I compiled a book from a whole lot of research about herbs in the heat, so I put that together. And since we have, you mentioned Word Fest, we have published and put together 3 books last year, which were published and sold to help us fund the festival. So I guess I was instrumental in some of those as well.
All right. I'm going to quickly go on to Word Fest in a second, but my one last question about your teaching career and students, how did you sometimes see something in some students where you thought they have a love or a gift for literature and for...
Yes.
Did you?
Yes, particularly when I was at one of the Bayside high schools in Brisbane. I had a group of French students for grade 12, and a couple of them were also in my English class. And they were the linguists. They were the people who understood how language was put together, because they had to understand English to be able to be very, very good at French. And so you could see the cogs turning, and you could see them thinking, yes, now I understand. And I think their English became much better. And I don't know whether I ever thought, oh, that would be a person who'd become an author or whatever, but I could see the intelligence and the skill that those people were developing. Yes.
And I suppose that's the whole secret of teaching, isn't it? Where you see in a child where they finally get it. They get the Shakespeare, or they get the Long Day's Journey into Night, or whatever it was.
Yes.
What's that? And they suddenly understand it, and it must just be so joyful as a teacher, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And it's the ones that stay behind to ask the questions, and they've been thinking about it. Their critical thinking skills are switched on. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, very satisfying, I would imagine. All right, now I want to talk about Word Fest.
Sure.
Tell the listeners what Word Fest is.
Okay, so Word Fest Toowoomba came out of a gap that I had in my teaching, where I had some time to think about, well, when I arrived back from Stanthorpe into Toowoomba, I didn't immediately notice a whole range of different things that word lovers or book lovers could get involved in. I ferreted them out for myself, but still wasn't convinced that there was a range of genres or a range of things outside the little niche that each person that might be involved in, say a little bit of a theatre group or a little bit of a poetry group or a writers group, the bigger community of Toowoomba, I think, lacked a knowledge and an understanding of who their local authors were, and what sort of wonderful history Toowoomba and the Darling Downs had in terms of its literary chronicling. So there seemed to be a gap. And so I'm never one to sit idly by, so I decided that if I could get a few hints from people that were in those groups, U3A, Toowoomba Writers Group, and Emma McTaggart, who was at that stage just establishing the wonderful Children's Rights Foundation down at the corner of Margaret and Hume Street called The Lighthouse, and Jane Smith, who's a wonderful historical novelist and has worked just recently on putting the 100-year book of St. Vincent's Hospital together. So people like that, and Nikki Solway from the university, USQ, and Jeremy from Jeremy's Book Exchange out at Uni Plaza. So in my uncovering these wonderful people, I pulled them all together, and we came up with the fact that, yes, we could possibly put together a little festival. It had been trialled by the Toowoomba Writers Group in about 2012, but it was a one-off and it hadn't continued. So we looked at how we could engage and co-opt and work with and partner a whole range of all of these groups, and that's how it started. So about 12 months ago, we first of all invited all our local authors to come to the Wright Gallery down at the Lighthouse, and we showcased all of their beautiful books that they'd published. And from there, they came up with some ideas, and we put together a big weekend over June last year. So that's how it began. It was very successful, not so much in terms of numbers, because we didn't have a huge marketing push, and we didn't have any grant money or funding. So we needed to have a rethink. So that's really why I went overseas as well, to encourage myself to be a little bit more open about how we might use some of those ideas in Word Fest Toowoomba. And I've come back looking at how we can build on what we did before.
Because I did read that it says celebrating all things words with literature, authors, zines, spoken word events, food, kids' energetic storytelling, quilts, poets, competition, and family fun. So that's quite a coverage.
Absolutely. And we did we did all of those things. We have a wonderful woman here called Irina Cobbold, who's been in Australia for a long time. But she has written a book called My Two Blankets, and it is bridging the gap for our beautiful refugee community here in Toowoomba, and how they have to walk in two worlds, and how they cover themselves in culture to be able to do that. So we had her and a quilting workshop, and we now have a beautiful wall quilt that we can use and show at our events, our future events. We have had lots and lots of authors with talents across zines and all sorts of different genres, and poetry and bush poets, and all of those things happened last year. But we really want to focus on the oral component of storytelling and the word that comes from music, from script writing, from poetry, from people looking at interviews, doing family history, ensuring that the words and the stories from their families are gathered and kept. We want to look at our Indigenous storytelling, so we're focusing on something very different this year, and trying to work out how we can work with our local Indigenous community to do storytelling under the stars at Gummingaroo. So things that are a little different, because most people, when they hear a writers' festival, think of it only as authors and the books that they're trying to promote. We want to look at things that have already been out there, books that have already been published, not necessarily, but also promote new authors. But we want to show that words come in all sorts of forms. We actually have a tattoo workshop, Words on Skin. So we're looking at a whole range of different things that might interest a wide variety of people, looking at sports people, interviewing people that have come from some of the publications that we did last year, building on the things that we've already put out there into the community.
Whereabouts and when will Word Fest be in 2023?
Well, we've got a couple of things happening in every month starting in January. So we've got an adult zine workshop, which will be out at Uni Plaza. If you
Tell the listeners what a zine is, please.
Okay, a zine, you may have heard the zine part of magazine, and really that's exactly what it is, but it's a personal magazine that you make yourself out of a theme or an idea or just visual pictures or whatever it might be, to create a message for yourself or for anyone else. Zines have been around for a long time, but they are suddenly making a resurgence, I think. And we've done a lovely little junior zine workshop on the 4th of November, and those young people have gone out now with the knowledge of how to create the actual little concertina little books that you can put in your ideas, your symbols, your whatever it might be, pictures, drawings, whatever. And so we're going to do one for the adults in January as well, because we've got some wonderful zine writers here, and the zine libraries have opened at Jeremy's Book Exchange and at the Lighthouse. So we want to fill some of those up. One of our local authors here, who is associated with Koorong, the Christian books shop in the is it the Preston shopping centre near where BCF is, and they have she's a published author. She's been a lecturer out there at USQ, and she's become very keen in zine writing, which sends messages which help people and young people to understand more of the Christian ethos and ethics. So there's no limit to what zines can do. Some of them are very adult, and so we didn't want to expose those to the children. So we're doing a special adult zine workshop. So we're going to be doing that out there at the Uni Plaza with Jeremy's Book Exchange and the book cover shop, which is a couple of doors down, where you can actually make the most beautiful collaged colour covers for your own books or magazines or journals or whatever you want. So I think that'll be something that we'd really like to do. The second event is we're going to update our street libraries brochure. The street libraries are the 24/7 beautiful little private libraries that are stuck on people's front gates and fences. They're in the front of places like Food Works there at opposite the Blue Mountain Heights area. Harlexton. Yes, thanks, Megan. And there's also High Street Plaza has a beautiful community library which is open basically all week. And we're going to update that. So it's a beautiful production with a map in the middle so that you can drive around and find the types of books that you want. Some of them are based at churches, some of them are based at non-profit organisations, some at private homes. So that's our January update.
I'll just remind the listeners that they're on 4DDB and you're with me, Megan O'Hara-Sullivan, in Big Little Small Talk, and we're talking all things Word Fest. So far, Lyndall's just updating us on what the program is for Word Fest. There's 1,000 different things on, so we've got... Yeah. I love the idea of the street libraries and the map. Where would people get the map for that from?
Well, that updated... They've run out of it at the information centre, but it was also at the main library, and it was in the Lighthouse. So it was in a few different places around. We dropped them in each of the libraries on the fences so people could then see where else they could go to, but we've run out. It was very popular, so we know that, and 2 of those libraries have closed, but I know 2 others that have opened, so we do need to update. There is also a list of other places. A lot of the professional places like optometrists and doctors and dentists quite often have a little library of books for people to be looking at while they're waiting. And so we want to list the places that are happy for us to add their names into the free list of books and so on.
While you're quickly just talking about the Lighthouse, do you want to just give a free plug for that? It's something that's been set up by Emma McTabbart. take it, but she has a lot of workshops, but she has a free library there, doesn't she?
That's
young
right.
people, I'll let you explain it.
Yeah, absolutely. Young people can go in, and all of the books that have been donated from the various organisations like Book Links and Child Right Foundation and so on.
All new books?
They are all new books. There is another set of books that are second-hand books that are used for their little Twinkles reading group for the littlies under preschool and so on. But yes, you can go in and you can just sit and read, or you can sit and take one later, or whatever. But the Lighthouse is it's a wonderful venue which has various little breakout rooms for workshops. The Wright Gallery, which is showing some wonderful artists' works across the years.
It's not right as in writing,
no,
is
it's
it?
WRITE, so it's all about books and so on as well. But the focus there that is different from Word Fest is that it's really focused on children. Ours is focused on adults, so that we can have things that are probably more interest to those people who are the parents of children who might love and become better readers and so on. So we've also got a little program called Reading Aloud, ALLOWED.
Tell me some more about that. That sounds really interesting.
So we know that there's a lot of teacher aides, a lot of grandparents, a lot of aunts, uncles and so on who end up, or babysitters or whoever, who end up with the child coming and saying, read, this is my favourite book, please read to me at night, or whatever it might be. And they're a little bit unsure, lacking in confidence or the strategies on how best to do that. And there are lots of different strategies that you can use to get the child involved in the reading of the book, as well as just, verbally flipping the pages and reading. And so we're going to do a workshop called Reading Aloud, so that everybody who is interested in learning better strategies on how to work with young people to do that, and hopefully some parents and grandparents would think that that's useful.
Excellent. Tell me some other things. When's the sort of main event, or is it just it's a whole series of things as well as a main event? Is that right, Lyndall?
Absolutely. A whole series of events right across from January through to May. And then our big festival weekend is in June, the first weekend in June, because when we looked at the calendars, there's so many things happening in Toowoomba that we had to find somewhere where we weren't stepping on people's toes for other cultural events and festivals and things that had already been well established in the region. So Friday the 2nd of June, we're having a community debate in the evening, hopefully, and these are all still in the planning and the developmental stage, because we're still negotiating with our partnerships and so on. But if things all come together, we're having a community debate around a controversial topic, and who knows what that might be by June. There might be a few. At the moment, we're thinking of along the lines of maybe the parking meters or the water or something like that. I'm not too sure. But the high schools, we want to get the high schools involved through their debating competitions, and the winner of the school debating competition perhaps debating a team of maybe our local councillors or journos or whoever it might be. So that's something to keep in mind. And we're also having a literary lunch on that day. We're hoping to get one of our big, wonderful conversationalists from radio to come and be our guest speaker, but that's under wraps at the moment until we confirm with whoever that might be. The Saturday, we're having lots of local and Southeast Queensland workshops, and then looking at our storytelling under the stars with night markets with all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island artisans and weavers and dyers and bush foods and all sorts of things telling their stories. And again on the Sunday, we'll be doing other workshops like our Words on Skin for our tattoo talk and our family history interviews and things like that to give people an opportunity to. And we'll be inviting lots of different organisations like U3A and Toastmasters and Zonta and people that might be interested in being part of some of those workshops.
So when you said, Lyndall, oral, did you mean oral as in speaking, or oral as in hearing, or both?
Both, because the storytelling is always about an audience. So somebody has to listen to hear what the oral speech is. So yes, it's usually a partnership. We did have the hope that we might be able to do some sign language as well. So we haven't pursued that, but that's something. And if any of your listeners are out there who've got contacts or may be interested, we'd love to hear from them.
What about the family history? What will that involve, that workshop? Is that a workshop?
Yes. Well, at this point in time, we would work with the Toowoomba Historical Society and the Family History Society, and I'm sure that they have people there who know the kinds of questions that can bring out from Grandma or Great Aunt Maud the stories that they want to put down and to capture forever. So it's really about a skill building so that anybody who's starting fresh or has had trouble finding information from their families, they might be able to use these as some skills.
Interesting. Now, part of this, I believe that you've got a job for me to do, and you and I have been have been having a little backwards and forwards. You've got an idea about women over 50.
We have. I've been working with the Women's Shed for 18 months, and they are just a wonderful organisation, and they share so many different things with so many other organisations that are out there trying to assist people and support women who might have been in domestic violence, a whole range of different things, recovering from cancer. And there seemed to be a lack of, acknowledgement of many of these things that were happening in the community. And people that are younger than 50 need to know that there is somewhere on their pathways if they happen to fall into some of the needs that we'd be looking at doing. So looking at conversations with people over the age of 50 who can help us to find what is a better way of finding friendships over 50. What about fun? What sort of fun can you have over 50? You don't just shrivel up and die just because you start turning grey or whatever it might be. Looking at fitness over 50, which is really important to stave off some of those things that might lead to some medical issues down the track if you're not careful. And looking at specialists in the community that have the handle on that. And ageing is a big issue, and it's been recognised by the federal government. And I think people need to start thinking about, what happens with the family if there's a big breakup, and, have you got your will in order? Have you got those things in order? So it's about steering people in the right direction, listening to some informed people. I'm a little bit anxious about conspiracy theories and so on, so I want people to hear from the people that know what they're talking about and have had that experience to try and to give life after 50 a real shine a big bright light on it.
So all of your little themes there, that's your teacher mind. You've got that alliteration. They all start with F.
Yes.
Correct. We've got fun, food, finance, fitness, friendship, family.
Yep.
What'll we call it? What about we call it give an F over 50? What do you think?
Absolutely, because it will be catchy
and a little bit naughty, which we like as well.
It could be. We could add a couple of naughty topics in there too.
So for listeners who might like to follow that or be involved, or what's your suggestion here, Lyndall?
Well, following it, I guess, is listening to you.
Big Little Small Talk, where we're going to be interviewing some of these people. Yeah.
Absolutely. And anybody who belongs to any organisations who may be able to help people in the community understand some of the issues for life after 50, particularly for people that may be like Prettier Place, for example, where people are turfed out of their domestic situation and life becomes very difficult, and homelessness can ensue. So I guess anybody who's out there listening who would like to get in touch, we would love to hear from them, and we'll leave the details of when and how up to you, I guess. So,
and also following Word Fest, if we jump on Facebook, is the best way to follow. If you haven't got Facebook,
we do. If you've got the internet, we have our website, which is just being updated for the 2023 programs and our profiles and so on. We've got some wonderful coordinators, people that you would like to know about and so on. So we're doing that. A monthly newsletter will be there. And if you want to join our newsletter list, just give us an email and we'll add you to that list and you'll keep in touch.
Do you have a coordination of, say people have moved to town and they love books and can't quite get into a book club? Do you have a coordination of those sorts of people?
We're actually looking at people like the Visitor Information Centre, I've been told that they seem to be the place people go to first, and we're probably going to be putting out something about an online book club, and Jeremy has a book club. There are some other book clubs already in Toowoomba, so that we could actually add that. Maybe we could even add it to the street libraries and maybe put some, great idea, add that in there too.
Now, what always happens with me, Lyndall, is I start to run out of time because people are just too interesting and their stories are too fantastic. But, and I think this is probably going to be an easy question for you, what's the last thing that made you laugh out loud?
Okay, the ABC show Fisk. I love it. The wit and the humour. Kitty Flanagan is such a wonderful stand-up comedian, and I've seen her live. I've watched everything she's done, and as soon as she comes on, I laugh. She doesn't even have to say anything. But Fisk, the series is in season 2 on the ABC at the moment. It is hilarious. The writing is superb. The characters are just so funny. And if you haven't seen it, get on there. It's free to air, and it's just a wonderful romp for 20 minutes or 25 minutes.
It's brilliant, isn't she? She
Yes.
wears the brown suit
Yes.
because it's easier that way. She doesn't have to think of what she's going to wear every day. I like
That's
it.
exactly right. It
What
wouldn't
about
suit you?
What were you obsessed with as a child, Lyndall?
Obsessed with musk sticks.
Tell me.
I just loved musk sticks, and my grandfather used to look after us after school, and he used to say, "Come on, it's time for beer and biscuits," which was, of course, ginger ale or some sort of a soft drink and biscuits. But he used to always slip in a few musk sticks and those very hard caramel lollies. So I was obsessed with them, and still am.
As you said that, I could smell the musk sticks. I can smell them as you said it. What do you think your most controversial opinion is, Lyndall?
Oh, I don't know. I've aged, I've mellowed. I used to be very outspoken, and people thought I was very brusque and a little bit too opinionated. But I have mellowed, so I think my most controversial thing is about conspiracy theories. I just think that they are so damaging, and if people just take the time to switch off from all of that and just relax, go outside, look up, enjoy nature, have a feel for things that make them feel happy and healthy, we'd be a lot better off.
Wow, we've just been through the pandemic. The US primaries are on at the moment, so if you want to talk conspiracy theories, they're running rife, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The right wing everywhere has a right for its speech, but it doesn't have a right to take away the freedom and the freedom and speech of others. So, yeah, I guess that's my controversy.
I don't think it's controversial. I think it's caring and all right, we'll go off that as controversies do. Don't talk politics and don't talk religion. What about the last time you looked in the mirror? What did you think?
I thought, before I went away on the trip, I looked in the mirror and I thought, I'm not being as healthy as I should be, and so I walked most days overseas and did lots and lots of walking. And I think that when I've come back and looked in the mirror, I think, yes, I can't see much bloody difference. Was it all worth it? But so I know that I feel much healthier, I feel better, and I feel ready to take on Word Fest Toowoomba for 2023 now, whereas before I was unhealthy. I was not sleeping and I was really run down, and I didn't think that I was going to manage to do another one. But we're looking at 3 years, so this is our middle year, and next year we're looking at a different theme. So I feel as if I'm ready to take on the world.
And it's the importance of getting some exercise for your mental health, I think, it cannot be overstated. Yeah. What about if you were to travel back in time, where would you set the controls for?
Right. I think I'd set the controls for back into the 70s. I loved the 70s. I had a great time at uni. I had wonderful friends. We had lots of fun, lots of socialising, and the world didn't seem quite so closing in on everybody. And I think the 70s were great. I had a great wig. Loved wearing my wig. Thought I was so cool.
What did your wig look like?
It was just one that you had to have a comb, and you used your own hair at the beginning and at the front, and then it just was, I guess, shoulder length, and it made me feel very classy, I guess, and going out at night. So it was sort of my going out gear. So I'd go back to the 70s. I loved it. I loved the clothes. I loved the sort of I loved the music. I loved the vibe of it all.
Well, that's a good segue into my next question, which is, what's the song that can't keep you off the dance floor?
I guess from that era, it's Mamas and the Papas, any of the Mamas and the Papas, or the Beach Boys.
Who's your favourite royal? Now, this person doesn't have to be British and they don't have to be living.
Right. Again, that's a bit of a difficult one. I guess I'd have to give a tribute to Queen Elizabeth II for the absolute staunch sense of duty and the integrity, because I think that a lot of stuff around her has crumbled in those recent times, but she stood for the values that she had been asked to take on and had been instilled in her from her parents and grandparents and so on. Whether the royals are worthy of worrying about or not is another thing, but I guess she epitomised the grace and the dignity, and I know lots of money and she could afford all that sort of stuff, but I think she was a very, had a lot of dignity and integrity.
Was she a big reader, do you know?
She was, actually, but she was also very much a TV viewer and loved a lot of the comedies, so a little bit in common as well.
And with that, we'll say thank you so much for being my guest on Big Little Small Talk, Lyndall. It has been a joy to hear, and I look forward to seeing what's going to happen with Word Fest and in all your other projects, our Give a F over 50,
Yay!
Which will keep going, and we'll no doubt have you back on to hear how Word Fest went for 2023.
Thanks, Megan. It's been a delight. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. That's it for this week. Thanks for joining me on Big Little Small Talk. I hope you can make the time to join me next week. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe on your favourite podcast app.